How the devil are we? I'm Matt, and I've heard grumblings that there might be another war, this time the US of A and Venezuela. Now, you can say what you want about Venezuela, about the leadership there, the narco boats, the floods of immigration, emptying the prisons into the US. It still always reminds me of a scene from that Jack Ryan show off Amazon Prime, where he was doing a talk about nations that basically everyone should be wary of, and it was in relation to the resources that country had. And Venezuela have got a lot of resources. I'm not talking about military might, I'm talking about resources as in minerals and things that they have got in the ground, basically. And you know that every time a country has got an abundance of resources, some other country covets that. So I'm not saying that's the reason for the war, but it looks like there's going to war. So let's have a look.
President Trump is spending the holiday weekend at Mar-a-Lago and on the golf course, and sending a barrage of missives on social media, affecting politics at home and abroad. Beginning yesterday morning, when he declared the airspace above Venezuela, quote, closed in its entirety, amid what he says is a campaign aimed at disrupting drug cartels.
To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for all your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. I don't for a second believe he writes these things out, I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't approve them. There's no way he writes them out.
Prompting Venezuela to accuse Trump of an, quote, illegal and unjustified aggression against their country.
The airspace above is beautiful. And surrounding Venezuela, which is a beautiful country, by the way. Very beautiful. We have beautiful people. Be closed in its entirety. No, that means no planes, nothing. Can't do Donald Trump, but something like that.
Country. Meanwhile, at home, he's taking his anti-immigration agenda to a whole new level. In the wake of the shooting of two National Guard members in Washington, with a suspect an Afghan national, Trump now threatening a host of new measures.
The thing is about Afghan nationals is there was a lot of Afghans who helped the US, Britain, the Western military, with overthrowing Taliban, and they worked closer with them. And then the US decided to pull out, and then within 48 hours, the Taliban was back in power. That was a shit show that must have left every vet affected by going to war in Afghanistan useless, basically. It's like, what's the point? What do we do it all for?
Halting all asylum decisions, saying he would pause migration from, quote, third world countries, while warning that green card holders from certain countries would have their papers reviewed. And his rhetoric has gotten even coarser. There's a lot to unpack this morning, and I have an excellent panel to break this all down with. Tia Mitchell with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, CNN's Stephen Collinson, and USA Today's Susan Page. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Thanksgiving belatedly. Nice to see you all here. I want to start with what's happening with Venezuela, because I think that a lot of Americans don't realize what's happening down there. We're seeing the biggest military buildup down there in the Caribbean in decades, and it's not entirely clear what the next steps are going to be. There's been more than 80 people killed in these more than 20 boat strikes that have occurred. The administration says it is about disrupting these cartels, but the buildup is much broader than suggesting a simple effort to try to get rid of cartels.
I mean, if the theory is that the government is corrupt, in the Venezuelan government, and that they're in bed with cartels and things like that, to that nature, then effectively the boats that are coming into the US are part of that infrastructure. I'm not condoning it or condemning it. I'm just saying I don't think you can unpick one just by saying, yes, these are drug boats, but then the Venezuelan government is completely different.
What is this? Is this an effort to try to topple the Maduro government there? Is this a possible war that they're preparing for? Or is it saber rattling?
I think one of the reasons why we don't know the answers to that is because the administration hasn't really explained it very well. To your point, it does look like a PsyOps operation to try and topple Maduro, the president of Venezuela, or to get the generals around him to do it for the United States.
I could kind of understand that, because it's almost like, well, if you don't do it, we're going to do it. So, and if you don't, and if we've got to do it, then you're all at risk. Your country's at risk. So I assume that they just want to do that for them. But people are not stupid, so you've basically got to say, yes, we are posturing, but it's not a bluff. And I don't for a second think Trump's bluffing. It's like, yes, we are posturing to say there is going to be military conflict. Do our job for us and topple the government, the regime. But if you don't, we are prepared to put our might to use, basically.
The administration's argument that this is all about drugs trafficking is somewhat curious, because if that was the aim, there might be other places in Latin America where you would start it. The polls, for example, show massive, overwhelming opposition among Americans to a war in Venezuela. A lot of people think it would be incompatible with the president's, foundational belief.
He looks exactly like Saddam Hussein. He looks a hell of a lot like Saddam Hussein.
Of no more foreign wars. But this is a very MAGA thing, I think. There's clearly an attempt by the administration to project American power through the Western Hemisphere. That's not new historically, but they're backing all of these populist right-wing leaders through Brazil, Argentina. The president intervened in the election today in Honduras, saying he was going to pardon the former president of Honduras, who was found guilty in the US of drugs trafficking. So that undercuts one of the big rationales. So it's very unclear, I think, exactly what the strategic goal is of the administration.
Yeah, it's just complete mess, and I suppose everybody is kind of just sitting there going, what the hell is going on? The first thing about any conflict is you've got to know the underlying reason for a conflict. And the lies that were told in Iraq, by the way, about weapons of mass destruction. People like Tony Blair never went to prison for spinning that rhetoric of all the lives that were lost in that conflict, of weapons of mass destruction. There was nothing there. No proof whatsoever. But again, if you don't understand what the conflict is and why the conflict is happening, if you're talking about 80 drug boats, then the US military could just sort those out. Any drug boat you could throw at the US, we'll sort them out. But if it's about toppling governments and maybe conflicting the country, then you've got to be very clear about what the reasons are.
Speaking of the polls, as you mentioned, the CBS News poll just out recently about whether Americans would favor military action in Venezuela. Just 30%, 70% would oppose. I mean, to Stephen's point, typically when you see a military campaign, there is a buildup, there's a messaging strategy. We saw this with George W. Bush in the Iraq War. There's really been none of that with the Trump administration right now.
In fact, an even higher percentage in that poll said the president needs to explain what's going on there. 3/4 of Americans said that. 2/3 of
Yeah, I suppose if you've got 70% and a lot of people go, oh, well, I don't know why we're doing this, what the aim is for the conflict, then it's going to be, I'm going to oppose it. If they explain this blah, 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 then it could be that 70% jumps higher. It could be that it jumps even lower. Yeah. It is what it is. People are making a choice. But if you don't really know what a conflict is about, then you're going to say, well, yeah, I don't want to go to war. I don't want anybody going to war. I don't want this country to go to war at any point. Especially a war that I don't know what the reason why.
Republicans said they needed to hear more explanation from Trump before moving ahead. So clearly this would be, I think, politically here, a risky maneuver and one hard to square with the pardon he's promised now to a Honduran president who has undergone due process and been convicted, as opposed to the 80+ people who've been killed at sea, who have not gone through due process before being killed by American forces.
And there are these questions that are building on the Hill, too, about the campaign that's going on there. Yesterday, we saw the leaders of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee come out and demand answers about a military strike that occurred, a boat strike that occurred in early September, in which Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, apparently ordered everyone who was on that vessel to be killed. There's some concern about the way that it was conducted that could have violated the rules of armed conflict.
Yeah.
It just shows you you don't really see this kind of bipartisan calls for information, investigation when it's Republicans leading these committees asking the Trump administration for details.
It's bipartisan. It's both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, so I mean, you're going to ask me, right, okay, if the boats turned out to be, and this is the proof in the pudding, right, if they could say with 100% certainty these are drug boats with drugs being smuggled into the US, which, it's a poison that's being smuggled into the US to make criminals millions of dollars, and citizens of the US will be killed through drug addiction and things like that, and destabilizing, communities based off drug addictions and drug selling. If you could prove 100%, would I approve of strikes against boats like that? Absolutely. I would. But if you don't come out and say this is what the proof is, and I'm suppose you're not going to share your intelligence, but there's got to be a way that you can say, yes, we do know for a fact. But if you've got local intelligence or CIA operating there, you can't really tip your hand, can you?
And I think, we don't have a lot of information even about the 80 people who were killed. But the little bit that has been reported as media has been digging is that they were relatively low level on, the hierarchy of drug trafficking.
I'm sorry, but if you're drug trafficking, can't say that fucking word. If you're drug trafficking, doesn't matter if you're the fucking Pablo Escobar or Pablo Milky Bar. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you're drug traffickers.
Were probably just regular people who were hired.
They're not regular people, then they're criminals.
To do the transporting, not necessarily the masterminds.
Well, that's all right then. Then why is the masterminds of this operation going to be fucking importing kilograms of coke or heroin into the US?
Behind the operation. So again, the question is, if you're just killing the mules, so to speak, does that really affect the operation? Because
then there's going to be no more mules, and all the products that you're shipping into the US is being blown to smithereens, and they'll stop doing it, or they'll try to find other ways of doing it, and that therefore they're not going to be sending these boats because it's useless, and the mules won't die.
At the end of the day, probably the cartels saw them as dispensable as well. So I just think there is so much problematic about these killings,
Well, what is our logic here, right? You got criminals smuggling in drugs, but because they're not the head honchos, then it's not right. What if it was Pablo Escobar sitting in the boat? Would it be okay? Or is she saying, I don't know the logic. The logic is the criminals. She's making it out like the fucking regular people on a pleasure cruise.
The buildup about what the plan is for Venezuela. And I think most Americans, not just, Trump, as we've talked about, his whole campaign was centered around ending foreign wars, focusing on domestic issues. But even beyond that, I think a lot of people in America are just like, why Venezuela? Why now? Why in this way? It just doesn't, there's just not enough evidence or information.
And I want to get back to what you referenced earlier here, Stephen, about this pardon that Trump gave to the former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, because what the Trump administration is saying is that this Venezuela campaign is about to disrupt these drug cartels. They say they campaigned on it. This is what this is about. Well, Hernandez was given an $8 million fine by a U.S. judge just last year and sentenced for 45 years in prison.
I was going to say 45 million years in prison then.
For his role in drug trafficking. This is how the New York Times put it. So the two posts displayed a remarkable dissonance in the president's strategy as he moved to escalate a military campaign against drug trafficking while ordering the release of a man prosecutors said had taken, quote, cocaine-fueled bribes from cartels. It goes on to say prosecutors said that Mr. Hernandez for years allowed bricks of cocaine from Venezuela to flow through Honduras en route to the United States. Trump said in his pardon about why he did it, he said in Truth Social, he said, many people said that he was treated very harshly and unfairly.
Yeah, and that seems to be the rationale, that he was a former president who was forced to face justice. We've seen this before, in fact, in Brazil, with the president looking after his political allies. Clearly, it's completely incompatible with the idea of a drugs war. But at the same time, I think this is a president and an administration that's increasingly seeking to use its power for its own purposes while it can, and perhaps isn't as much worried about polls and the Constitution and power.
I get a feeling that that's the case with Trump in his second term. He came in and it was like, bang, I'm here for 4 years. Is it 4 years or 5 in the US? I'm not sure. But he's here for this term. I'm in my 80s. They've tried to put me in prison. Someone's tried to kill me. Bang. Just going to fucking do it. Going to do what I want. And fuck it. What's people going to do to me? That's not been over to be tried. I'm not condoning it, but it seems to be the way that he is, to be honest. It's almost like, regardless of public opinion, we're just going to go in and bang, we're going to do these things. But it's a communication, I think. It's like this whole Venezuela thing. It's like, if you come out and communicate about why this entire conflict is happening, then people will probably either go, oh, well, fuck, we don't agree with that even more, or go, okay, I could kind of understand it.
As perhaps it should be, given the fact that a lot of Republicans are worried about how this all plays out in the midterms.
You know, the fact that the Republican chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee are willing to announce that they're going to investigate this, demand some answers from the Trump administration, strikes me as one sign of the erosion we're beginning to see with President Trump standing, even with his own party. We've been waiting for years for this to happen. It's been predicted again and again, but his approval rating is down to a record second-term low.
I don't think he gives a fuck. I really don't.
And Republicans are increasingly nervous about what's going to happen in the midterms to them in next year's election.
In the meantime, he's announced all these immigration efforts as well. While this is all happening in Mar-a-Lago, the shooting of these National Guard members happened in Mar-a-Lago. One of them, sadly, was killed, another one fighting for his life. Trump then going on social media saying he would go all out on a whole wide range of actions. While he was in Mar-a-Lago, of course, he was playing golf. He posted this on social media, playing golf with the live golfer Brooks Koepka, the former NHL great Wayne Gretzky, the Fox News host Brett Baer. That happened yesterday. Trump posted a chip shot that he made also as well, pinned that to the top of his Truth Social account. But he was also announcing pretty aggressive immigration actions, among them halting all asylum decisions, pausing the visa issuance for travelers with Afghan passports, saying that he would permanently pause migration from all third world countries, and it goes on.
Cutting off federal benefits for undocumented immigrants, working to permanently pause migration from all third world countries. I'll tell you, from someone who's in the UK, with people from third world countries arriving by boat every single day, and most of it, 90%, don't let anyone fucking fool you, or idiots in the Labour Party say that it's all women and children. It's not. All you can see is a bunch of young men getting off the boats. The RNLI, which is the Royal National Lifeboat Association, I think, they go out into the waters and pick up the boats and then escort them in. They then get a bus to an hotel. Then they get put up. They get 3 meals a day paid for. There's talks where they've been given driving lessons. They've been given free days out and trips. They've got the NHS is in the hotels, giving them free healthcare, free dental. All of this being paid for by the taxpayers. And then some, not all, but some of those people that have arrived by boat, some of those men, have then gone out and committed crimes of sexual assaults and stabbings, murders, thefts. They then go out. You've seen them go out and they've started to work illegally. They're not supposed to be working, but they're going out working. Usually on things like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, things of that nature. And when you ask them about why they committed some of these crimes, especially around sexual assaults, they'll say things like, "Oh, it's a part of our culture." It doesn't mix. They're not being given any sort of, what do you call it, orienteering. Okay, you're in this country. Why are you in this country? Oh, I'm escaping some war. Okay, well, you escape the war, but then you pass through Germany, you pass through Belgium, you pass through Holland, you pass through France. None of those countries are currently at war to get to the UK, because the UK is a soft touch and will just give you a lot of benefits. And you commit a lot of crimes, and then because of the ECHR, which is the European Commission of Human Rights laws, you can't even deport them. One guy said his brain wasn't fully developed, so the judge started giving him a lenient sentence. He was in his 20s. Brain wasn't fully developed after committing a sexual assault. That's why Britons are pissed off with it all, because it's two-tier justice. You know, if you're white Briton and you say some out words on the internet, you get probably arrested for it, and there's precedent for that. And if you commit sexual assaults, you either get let off, or the media won't print names of the perpetrators through fear of social unrest, as they call it. It's crazy. And then you put them up in hotels and you see them eating 3 square meals a day on free Wi-Fi, getting laptops, sitting in windows, laughing at people outside protesting, because they're working 9 to 5 to pay for it all. So anyone who's looking at that thinking it's a bad idea, take it from Europe. It's probably not.
The question is, how much can he actually do, and whether the American public likes it. 62% of American adults disapprove. 69% of independents disapprove of his handling of immigration. This used to be his strength.
Yeah, and the perception was.
Well, wasn't that what he got voted in for? He said, "I'll deport everybody," and then he got voted in, right? And as soon as he starts doing it, people are disapproving. I don't know. You tell me why you would disapprove of all the ICE raids, people getting deported. Is it illegals, or is it legals that are getting deported as well, and that's what's causing the conflict? Do let me know. I'm here to be educated, by the way. I'm not being an arse. It's just, let me know why some people are not happy with the way that he's approaching deportations.
Was that Trump was initially, when he came back to the White House, he said, "I'm doing what I was elected to do, which is crack down on immigration." So this polling indicates that people think he's gone too far, because.
Yeah, there might be a bit of elements of that. I mean, I've seen people where they've been getting taken from, like, the immigration check-in. So I think every so often you've got to go and do a check-in, because you're not really a citizen yet. So you've got to go and, like, sign in and say, "I'm still in the country," and you've got to fill forms out and things. And people have been picked up at those immigration centres as part of their normal processes and being deported. And they're just people going out working, and paying and taxes and stuff, and they might not be there. They might not be there legally to begin with, but they might have been in the country for a number of years and started families and stuff. But so there is some sympathy there, but I don't know. Is it that people are being deported that shouldn't be deported?
It's not like he hasn't done what he campaigned on, but he did it in a way that I think some Americans perceive as extreme. And now he's announcing more policies that in many ways are not only extreme, but again, it's the lack of focus. What are we trying to accomplish here? Because if this is about the very tragic killing of the National Guardsman, then we need to know more about the motives behind that killing to make sure that nothing like this happens again.
Okay, I can kind of understand that, but then in the UK, you have 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift, or I think it was a Taylor Swift dance party in Southport, stabbed and then you've got 11 people on a train stabbed, sexual assaults all over the place, stabbings, people getting robbed. What do you do? Just ask for what's your motivations? What's your motivations? What's your motivations? Or do you say we're importing a lot of people, putting them up in hotels, and then they're going out committing crimes against the general population? And at some point, you can't just keep sitting there going, "What are your motivations?"
By all accounts, this individual accused of killing the National Guardsman was vetted, was a legal immigrant, legal. So some of the things that the president is announcing don't seem to really be about anything other than more extreme in immigration rules.
I often go back to thinking of how they explained it, kind of just like the way the Venezuela campaign. They said they were going to do the largest deportation force in history. Trump campaigned on that, sure. But then when they were asked after they won, well, what does that look like? They didn't quite explain it. They said that we get rid of the most violent criminals, and but it's like, okay, then what? And we've seen this go much further.
I think he's got a point. It's the communication. Communication is key to everything, right? If you come out and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, then people might say, whoa, that's a bit too far. And then he might do it anyway. But to say, I'm going to deport everybody, like deport 1 million people in like 2 weeks, and then spins up things like alligator Alcatraz, people will say, yeah, he's gone too far. And I suppose it's those families that are affected where maybe they've not been criminals, but they've been illegal immigrants, which technically means they're a criminal. If you went to the country illegally, it's not just the fact that you're not a non-citizen. You're a criminal because you went to the country illegally. And then some people had 20 years to get citizenship and they didn't get citizenship. But is that typical? Let me know. Is that typical where it takes 20 years to get citizenship? Or is it just some people who think, you know what, I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. But then eventually things like this, where Trump's doing en masse deportations, and it's like, are you a legal citizen? No. Did you get into the country illegally? Yes, but 20 years ago. Okay, you're getting deported. So I can imagine how some communities are reeling from all this. Seeing the neighbours just disappearing one day. Families split apart. So let me know what you think. I just think he's in his 80s, second term, gone through attempted assassinations, attempted jailing, things like media, like BBC, just coming in and blatantly telling lies and putting things out there and editing in a certain way. And he's probably thinking, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. And I don't think he's looking at the polls thinking he's worrying about anything. Anyway, on that really happy, cheerful note, I'll see you on the next one. You take care.